Alright, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here in Mendham. A metaphor for any place on Earth where perhaps a person thinks, about their existence and contemplates where it's going. Yeah, what's its function, and perhaps worries a little about the conclusion. About the end game. Ooh. Anyway, so there's a clip from a movie, Hero. Okay, it's not, it's just one of those movies, that goes, somehow it's under appreciated. And it's really, quite good, just as a piece of junk entertainment, I think. But just the characters created are very real and in some sense significant even. And anyway, so I found it an intriguing thing to watch, and I've seen it more than once, and it's a good movie for a lot of reasons, just as junk entertainment, but also because there's a lot of underlying statements about popular media and what happens to people. The whole idea that there's more to your life than, say, one event that makes you wonderful or makes you a piece of shit. And obviously a life is more than those single events. And anyway, so this little ending sermon is sort of useful, so I thought I would play it and see what happens. I mean, I'm really not doing any copyright problem, really.
You remember where I said how I was going to explain about life, buddy? Well, the thing about life is, it gets weird. People are always talking to you about truth. Everybody always knows what the truth is, like it was toilet paper or something, and they got a supply in a closet. But what you learn as you get older is there ain't no truth.
Okay, so that part I would disagree with. Yeah, of course, there is a truth. And that's what you learn, is that all these people, though, aren't struggling to find the truth. They're struggling to find redemption and meaning and purpose and comfort and relief. So they want a narrative that has the happily ever after in it somehow. Somehow they want something that they can fold into a more graceful exit than the exit they're going to get, frankly.
All there is bullshit. Pardon my vulgarity here. Layers of it. One layer of bullshit on top of another. And what you do in life, like when you get older, is you pick the layer of bullshit you prefer.
So you don't get older and pick bullshit. You pick bullshit when you're 6, and then you pick some more when you're 8, and then you pick a different pile of bullshit when you're 10. So you start refining your bullshit based on experience and, what life presents you. And what you start to see is you acquire an ability to see bullshit. Okay, so, yeah, they might fool you with religious stories when you're 5. They didn't fool me, but, I mean, they might fool you. You might be able to somehow imagine it to be something other than a bizarre pile of mush that they're telling you that you could prove is invalid, just by noticing you don't have a fireplace. What's Santa do? Break through the window? Anyway, continuing.
And that's your bullshit, so to speak. You got it?
Right, so that's sort of all that this is good for, is this idea that you pick a pile of bullshit and live a bullshit life. And it's not much of a message, frankly. Okay, it's not much of a statement about what you should be pursuing, which is some kind of truth. And the truth, and a recognition of obligations and responsibilities, looking for your blood footprint, looking for what you've done to the world, not just what the world has done to you, kind of message. And all of that is sort of missing from that statement of just live bullshit. that's humiliating. I mean, if my father told me I'm just supposed to be full of shit and just have a shitty story like every fucking buddy else and just make up crap, I would have been kind of disappointed that that's the best they could do as advice, is just pick bullshit and live bullshit. So anyway, so yes, obviously I don't agree with the statement, but I just mean the idea that that's what humans are doing is absolutely true. That, you know, but people aren't seeking the truth. They're just seeking comforting bullshit and excusing living in bullshit, living by the bullshit, you know, as if that exempts them from scrutiny and criticism. Just be part of a club or a gang, like a religion, all right, and somehow you're exempt because everybody else is doing it, and I don't have to justify my behavior, and I don't have to justify the behavior of the group, and I don't have to justify anything, because we're all doing it, and so if we all agree, therefore it must be right. Something like that. So that's part of the story. The other part of the story, somebody left a comment, you know, asking me just some kind of simple thing. What do you think of Vonnegut? And of course, you know, my first thought is, oh yeah, that's that Fahrenheit 451 guy, or Catch 22, or, you know, I come up with books that aren't his books, you know, so stories that aren't his stories. You know, and then I have to go look and see, oh yeah, oh yeah, I remember Slaughterhouse 5, and then this, you know, so you have to kind of go through what you have as an understanding, but you have some vague notion that it's, you know, dark humor in a way, and again, not tied so much to reality, but some sort of thinking strategy. You know, that somehow makes ludicrous not ludicrous, while still saying it's ludicrous, I guess. Something like that, anyway. You know, without writing the book that is so overtly a statement against existence and how preposterously silly it becomes and is. And it does become sillier and sillier as you get older and older. It becomes harder and harder to see any rational roads or any straight lines or anything to grok and hold on to and say pretty flower or anything. Everything becomes part of a really ugly picture, and so it loses any capacity to find something redeeming. There's nothing redeeming in it. There's just corpses in the end, and your image of them, you know, all the magnificently beautiful things that wilted and fell apart and died, and they weren't flowers. They weren't insensitive, you know, things to talk about. You know, they were people. You know, they were, you know, something that matters, that their experiences mattered, and those hard to look at experiences are the real story of being alive. So, in that vein, I think I will title this video something like, you know, Life is War. You don't need war stories. Maybe something about a war story. Life is a war story. All of life is a war story. Because it really is. I mean, right? I mean, if you have to have, you know, your ovaries and uterus removed because of cancer, well, that's a war story. You know, if you know, there's all kinds of things that, you know, that was in one of Vonnegut's books. I remember a wife, and it was just kind of funny because he's talking about all his miseries of war, but there's nothing about the miseries of just staying alive in a world trying to kill you. I mean, you know, with diseases and, you know, other crap trying to annihilate you, and that's all part of the story too. Those are all war stories, and it just makes the whole thing that much more grisly. You know, that you don't have to be unlucky enough to be in a war event to be in a war event, you know. Something like that. And it gets back to this, we're all heroes and we're all shitheads, you know, gets back to this kind of theme that, you know, we've all earned our existence, in a sense. We've all paid some price for it. And, you know, it should make us humble and give some pause, is the simple argument, you know, to any idea of rooting, you know, for the next experiment, when it could be just this much worse, or it could be, you know, this much worse, or, you know, it could be that much worse. I mean, it can just almost be exponentially worse. So I think that's the beginning anyway, and I shall be back. Alright, back. So I was thinking, so in Slaughterhouse 5 there's always some sort of gimmick or twist in stories, or, you know, a lot of stories anyway. Scrooge and the ghosts kind of nonsense, and, you know, you couldn't just have a dream. Yeah, you know, they had to make it into some sort of stranger thing than that. Not that it's a bad, you know, it worked as a plot device, blah, blah, blah. I would have just preferred that he just had a dream, and the dream gave him insight into his behavior, and he figured out he was a shithead. I mean, it's, you know. Anyway, so in the Vonnegut thing, it's this idea of time not being a real thing, and moving from, you know, being in one moment to another moment. Now, yeah, to some extent we can do that. So it's like the dream metaphor, in the sense that you can relive your past moments by asking your brain to produce what it has of those moments, you know, and go seek them, so to speak. Just, you know, try to live, relive, reconstruct, you know, the bits that you have in some sort of coherent form, but you can't live in all the moments at the same time. It's just not possible. You can't. The composition won't allow it. It won't allow you to squish all of those memories into these memories, into those memories, and that kind of thing. So there's no point in, there's no prospect of, you know, living in all moments at any one time. But anyway, besides the argument that somehow that is possible, you know, I was just thinking about, you know, my life and the different people I've had both the pleasure and the horrific, you know, tragedy of knowing and having to share with them their destruction. And the first one, you know, it's, some people are going to say trivial, but it's not trivial. So my first dog was sort of a mutant. Okay, it was the byproduct of a mating between a Malamute and a Dachshund. The mother was the Dachshund, right? So it starts with her death, giving birth to 9 puppies. And I was a paper boy, so these were people I delivered papers to. And so I never really imagined getting a dog, but they kept sort of, you know, pushing. And there was a point where, yes, I'm looking at the puppies and the whole thing, and they're all so damn cute. And so I decided to try to persuade my parents that, you know, it somehow would be a good thing to get a dog. And they weren't too enthusiastic, but they finally conceded. And so I took the runt, the mutant. Her name was Rascal. And she barely survived because she was a runt and all that kind of stuff. The last one produced by the dying mother. Anyway. And so it became my dog. And, you know, I kept the name even though it wasn't too... I didn't like it much, but whatever. It was just a great dog. I mean, the dog just loved me. You know, it followed me on the newspaper route. I never had to put it on a leash. It it was just, it was definitely my dog. And for a little dog, it had all these, it wasn't very big. It was bigger than a dachshund, but it had like the skin. It was like a basset hound. It just had all this extra, outside layers. And it would pull me on my sled, and all this kind of stuff. So it was very, it's a great little dog. And so on its 1-year birthday, which it was in the winter, we had a nice thing for it, a house with a caged-in part, and it was a outside, because my parents just didn't want a house dog, and but it wasn't bad. It was an insulated, it actually had layers with insulation, so it was a nice house, nice dog house. My father got used. Yeah. So anyway, so I, on its birthday, I built a cake out of Gainsburgers. They were little squares. I can't remember what it was called, but they were little squares of, dog food. And I built it a cake with a candle, and I go out, on its birthday, and the dog doesn't come out, and so and the dog was really sick. It just couldn't get up, couldn't move, just wasn't happy at all. And then it started snowing, right? And it's this blizzard it turned into, just a raging blizzard. Okay, my dog's dying, and the local vet isn't in his office, so we had to go to a vet that was like 12 or 15 miles away, and in a snowstorm, and so it took like 2 hours to get there. And I just remember sitting in the car with my dog as it's dying, and so we take it to the vet, and he sticks a thermometer in its butt, and it comes out bloody. And so the vet didn't say anything, but I knew that wasn't right. I knew something had to be way fucked up. And it had, apparently its organs were fucked up, so that's why it died as it was reaching maturity, is because its intestines were wrapped around its liver, and it strangled its liver. Just whatever. So it died in surgery. And it's just, it's such a bleak event, and you're just saying, well, what about my life is going to be so spectacular that I would risk doing that all over again? Especially to the dog, because the whole way we're driving, I'm trying to comfort the dog, but it was just so miserable, and uncomfortable. And I just, having that, even the dog's misery is bad enough, but when you have to sit and be powerless to do anything, that was like the first time, I guess, I really felt that, like, you already feel like a fuck up and a loser, but it's even worse when something you care about and you can't do a motherfucking thing. You have no power, nothing. And so all I need is that event. I put that, that little event on this side of the scale. There's nothing else I can put over here that says, okay, that was worth it. Let's do it again. Fuck you. No, let's not. And so that's a difference in our bullshit, because my bullshit is, there's no way you sign up to relive those the bleakest of the bleak experiences. Where you're just so empty and so completely corrupted inside by a kind of maggots have eaten you from the inside out, and there's nothing inside of you that sees anything redeeming. You can't see anything bright. And yes, a week later, you've suppressed reality. And I actually did make the mistake of getting another dog, not weeks later, but, and that was because I had this expectation that dog is dog, right? That dog was great, and so I'll get another great dog. And he was a great dog, but he was a great dog in such a different way that, he was just so much trouble because I didn't get him fixed. And see, that's the problem, right? I mean, I'm supposed to go through life saying, okay, here's an animal. You're going to cut its nuts off, you know, and that means no boners, no fun anymore. And I couldn't face that prospect of saying I'm going to do that to some creature. I'm going to take that away when I knew it was the only thing keeping me alive. You know, there was nothing else to live for. You know. A man without a boy without his penis? What the fuck is there? There's no life to live. You know, there's nothing. That's just as desert and, you know, as dry and unfulfilling as you can imagine. I can imagine. So that's my bullshit again, right? I mean, that's a bullshit that, you know, only some males could understand, maybe I should say, because there's a lot of males who don't have any interest in keeping their junk. But yeah, frankly, yeah, you just can't even. This is like it's hard to imagine crimes of defacement that could be in any way worse. You know, eef. Yeah, it's just scary to even contemplate. But anyway, so there's this one little story. So I just thought, you know, my brain poofed in there, and so I said, yeah, you know, I haven't thought about that in a while. I haven't thought about how that hunk of pain and futility probably did ruin me psychologically. I mean, it was one of the events, you know, I could just, you know, put the little events where I didn't have control, where stuff was happening to me that I couldn't do anything about, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I could just say all those little events where you have no control psychologically just ruin you, because you can't live with the perception that you don't have control. You can't live well, can't live comfortably, because it's got you constantly paranoid, waiting for the next out-of-control event. Yeah, I don't know how it's like me acquiring vertigo. I mean, I could make the argument that I can think of one event that probably caused it. You know, where I fell a little bit backwards on a roof and had to do the real catch yourself thing. I didn't actually fall, but I came close, you know, to falling off a roof. And somehow my brain turned that into, you're never getting on a roof again. And I really have to struggle to get on a roof now. I mean, I have to crawl and just, you know, I just can't, you know, and it's just because of that event. You know, I could argue that it's been tainted. It's like eating a bad food or something, getting sick on it, and then for the rest of your life you ain't going to touch that shit. You can't keep, you lose all your momentum. So I could argue that that's my part of my bullshit, is that I'm one of the people who lost all their momentum. You know, that I had enough of these little war stories to make me shell-shocked, in the sense of aware enough of what I was in, and aware of the fact that there's no comfy chair to sit in, and no cigar to smoke, and no brandy to you know, that's going to make it okay, because I'm on the Titanic and it's got a big hole in it and it's starting to do this. No, I can't change the story. So anyway, yeah, that's, you know, it's more of a video anyway. Yeah. So we'll see where I go next. Who knows? I don't know. Alright, back. So I was thinking about the falling off too many roofs as a way of sort of explaining, without telling a bunch of little war stories, and saying this is how I acquired my bullshit. And again, that's what it's going to be called by other people. It was, yeah, a bunch of little stories that made me into the person I became. And one of the stories is that I was a very late maturer. So, I was very, very short in a family of tall. And, I didn't get tall until, I didn't stop growing until I was 21. In that last year I grew a full inch. So, by the time I became something, not to feel insecure, all the insecurity of being the small, the runt, the incomplete, the unfinished thing, had already done its damage, so to speak, to my capacity to ever enjoy being on the roof again. So, when I had reason to be more confident, I had no capacity to be confident. So I couldn't enjoy the cupcake as long as I was going to still be on the roof, so to speak. I couldn't take advantage because I'd been ruined by the previous experiences, and that's the simple truth. And so I spent the rest of my life like this, uncomfortable, always aware of the vertigo, the imbalance, the uneasiness, the roughness of the sea. And, never will there be another sunny, calm day. There would just be a foreboding and a waiting, for the boards to give in and the boat to sink kind of thing. Anyway, it's no way to live. And, you should try to avoid it if possible. But again, it's also the reason why I understand and have anything called empathy, or and have any value for the weight of all of the wasted pain and suffering that goes into this silly parade, called existence on Earth. And so it brings me back to one of the experiences when I had my appendix out in the hospital. And I remember the screaming, of other patients. And, every now and then you'd hear the, shrieks of somebody else in horrible distress. And, first you'd try to imagine the person and imagine what horrible thing happened to them. So I was always empathetic in that sense, that I would first imagine something happening to that person and how bad it would have been for that person. Like I knew for one day a kid who had lost his arm in a lawnmower accident, but I didn't have any details about how exactly you do that. So I was thinking of all the ways that a lawnmower could cut your arm off, and it wasn't too many ways I could imagine. I mean, I could understand it, doing damage, but I just couldn't imagine how it could actually, how you lose your arm. And so maybe it got torn apart and then, it was beyond fixing, so they had to take it, cut it off. But who knows? I don't know. And so at first I'm empathetic, and then it seeps in that I'm vulnerable, that this is something that could happen to me. And, and I have to concede that's when it gets realer. Okay. It's bad when it's happening to somebody else, but it's definitely worse when it's threatening me. And that sort of happened at the hospital, is that it was bad, thinking about the other people, and then imagining that that's going to be my fate, and that tomorrow I'm going to be the one screaming. That's the part that made it really dismal and hard to accept and bad. All right, back again. So I was thinking about first times, and how, there's lots of things you do in life for the first time. And yes, most people think when you say something like that of your first sexual experience. But, there's lots of different ways, and, that can come in lots of different forms. And it's first time with a different person, even. So it's sort of first time, always first time, when it's somebody different, I suppose. But yes, some of it is already understood as you have expectations, and it sort of ruins any kind of surprise. I don't know what the right word is. But I was thinking in terms of all kinds of first times. First time you interact with a frog, or first time you interact with a snapping turtle, or first time you interact with something. And so that was a lot of my life, was those in learning experiences. Is always just kind of, those are the things you remember. Is when you first acquired the capacity to do something, because it was full of all of this challenge and uncertainty, like riding a bicycle. I never did the training wheel thing. It was either, sink or swim, and I sank a lot. And again, this was part of the thing that got me psychologically inferiorized. Was my first bicycle wasn't anywhere near the right size for me, so it was way too big. I couldn't reach the pedals at the bottom, all that kind of stuff. And so it was really a challenge, and so I crashed a lot. And but it was just part of that struggle thing to overcome, and you always, even simple things somehow became challenging things. And when you think about it in hindsight, it shouldn't have been that way. And then even school, you could argue that me in school got off to all kinds of wrong feet, because it was just another place you go to get judged. And I was kind of full of that already. That wasn't something very appealing. So instead of just inspiring you to use your creativity and be a contributor to the questions that might be asked and the answers that might be provided, there wasn't any of that encouragement. But certainly later in life, that's what I sort of used the experience for. I was definitely a inquisitor. I definitely had a lot of questions to ask. And so then I became annoying because I asked too many questions. So you just can't win. You either don't participate at all, you participate too much, or it's always something to do the wrong way rather than what society says is the right way, what the book says, the Holy Bible. Anyway, just not quite the right camera angle, but, it's not a big deal and such. I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah, but I'll fiddle with it. Anyway, so how do I turn that into anything? So it's just that's part of the testimony that people should be providing as they talk about what life is to them, what their bullshit is. I just can't imagine that people that have lived any kind of amount of time wouldn't have a generally positive attitude in terms of saying, well, it's definitely a mixed bag, and you really have to be careful, and you have to be thoughtful, and there's a lot of stuff that can go all kinds of sideways and bad, and they're really not sending that message. Their endorsements are too open-ended and not full of any of the hindsight that you'd expect from people that have lived a little while and recognize that do what I say, not what I did, especially, right? There's lots of I dids that I'd say, fuck, that was just so goddamn stupid. Like riding a bicycle and you do the no hands thing. Just things that are just, it's a little bit exciting, and it's, fun, and it feels better, because you're not having to do any, work, but it's not worth it, technically, because the lottery you're opening yourself up to is just too bad. The outcome, if it goes wrong, is just too wrong. And, those kind of things. And so, you're saying to yourself, okay, I'm just becoming an old fart. and nag and all of that crap. But it sort of is the right narrative. It's the truth, okay, that you think it's worth it, but it really isn't worth it. And that's what all of these subjects are really about, is, these, insufficient solutions, compromises, half measures, all the things you can just point out. They don't work in the end. I mean, you either do it right or you don't do it at all, kind of thing. And you either do it safe or fail safe, or you don't do it all, like with nuclear power plants and stuff like that. Because, yeah, if it goes wrong, it goes wrong too catastrophically. You can't afford to do it halfway, or even 3/4 of the way. You can't leave any of the way undone. Yeah, so, I find it almost mockable that somebody could be 40 years old and be, what's the phrase people use? I can't think of it. That's part of the problem of getting old. All this vocabulary disappears, and you're stuck with, a lesser vocabulary, and stuck in moments where you're wasting time thinking, what's the fucking word I'm trying to remember? And then you forget what you're talking about anyway. But anyway, so yeah, I've lost the whole theme. Where was I going with this? But just how could you be an adult and, without any apprehension, make statements that are pro-lifey, in the sense of not recognizing that, no, you can't be pro having babies on garbage heaps. You can't be pro having babies when you're too poor to take care of your kids. You can't be pro, there's got to be some kind of conditions that you apply to this pro-lifeness. Just out of life experience and recognizing the horror, okay, that the likely outcome isn't going to be much of an outcome. And, why would you endorse an outcome that's not good enough? Alright, now somewhere in all this I wanted to get to the fail video thing, that there's obviously in people some kind of different mechanism than I'm made out of. So their bullshit is somehow made out of a way to incorporate what happens, especially what happens to other people, as entertainment. And, that one I just don't understand. So, there's been shows like Cops and 9/11 and all that stuff, and that Asshole, whatever it was called, Asshole, whatever show was called. And you're just saying it's just having fun, inviting torment and torture, and you're just saying that's just sick. And then, there's a bunch of people that watch people fail, fail videos. And they're hard to watch, in my opinion. They're almost impossible to watch. In the sense of, for some silly thing like putting a basketball in a hoop off of a, trampoline or something. And, these are bad. I guess they don't show the worst, somebody paralyzed, but I mean, it's bad. And, I just don't understand how there could be pleasure involved in witnessing that bad. But I couldn't see how there's much pleasure involved in watching kids walk down the street or having a toddler. I can't imagine what the pleasure would be that you could have when it's just a walking disaster. And there's nothing you can do about it, because yes, it's got to learn. It sinks or swims kind of thing, and you got to keep watching things sink every now and then. And who wants to do that? Well, apparently people do, but I just mean I can't understand it at all. How one derives any kind of comfort or pleasure out of such experiences. Trauma is not a pleasant thing to witness, in my opinion. So that even gets to like horror films and stuff. Never my thing. Just, you know, because of the fact that it's visceral and real to me. To me, it's they're reenacting, you know, real horror. You know, how could that be fun? Unless it's in a context where it's not supposed to be fun, like a war movie or something. But then it's really no fun either. So it's really hard to, you know, it's really hard to go anywhere in the story, because there's parts of the story that are that wreck it. You know, you could argue that change the mood so dramatically that you can't go back to the silly person's narrative. I'd argue that Gone with the Wind was a little bit like that, because they reenacted you know, the dying wounded so well that it was really hard to go back to some stupid love story, you know, and give a shit. You know, frankly, you know, the characters lost all substance and meaning because of the almost insane lack of change in the character in terms of having to witness something like that. And you'd say, how could you be unchanged by the event? And so those are, again, this is the bullshit people live by, that somehow their bullshit gives them a capacity to acknowledge something as horrible as the Civil War, as horrible as all of those miserable, horrible deaths to all of those boys. And you know, you know, and not in some way have that affect who you are and what you are, in terms of recognizing it changes your perspective. It taints any notion of how important it is that I, you know, get an A on my paper, or I get a trophy for some silly thing, or I, you know, have some good adventure, you know. It just, you know, it makes it all seem so fucking trivial by comparison. And it has no character or integrity. It is crayons, you know, next to Michelangelo. It's turned into nothing. The meaningless little concerns, the meaningless little adventures, the meaningless little pursuits in the context of all the grander things that would never be, and the horrible things that were in its place. You know, instead of a bunch of people having lives, there's a bunch of horrible and awful and slow and just torturous death instead. And that's not good enough. So again, it always gets back to, it's not a single player game, it's too expensive, and it's not your money. So why are you financing it? You know, why are you promoting it? Why are you selling it? You know, because these stories won't be the fables that you're still telling. This happily ever after thing doesn't happen, okay, anywhere, to anyone, ever. Yeah, you're only lucky, you know, if a plane crashes on your house. You know, if you're dying this fast. Yeah, that's it. Few people get off lucky, but the rest will pay the price. And it's just way too high a price, says I. Repeatedly, I say it. Yeah, but anyway. Alright, pause there and see if I can finish this up. And such. Alright, suppose I should finish up making the true bullshit story. You know, the story that is the actual story, okay? The real bullshit that we're living, and you're living, whether you believe it or not. And it just has to do with a universe that's clumps, and the clumps are clumps of chemistry, and that the clumps of chemistry can get complicated. Different atoms sticking to each other and making a compound, and that those compounds can eventually, through all kinds of bizarrely improbable events, end up becoming reproductive, and then they can become part of a system that builds a machine, and then the machines can acquire a central processing mechanism, a brain, and that most directly controls the function of the machine in the biological environment, where survival is all there is, and that will decide the fate of the chemistry. To get into the future, the chemistry must be manufactured in such a form that the behavior it creates induces the event of procreation and surviving long enough to procreate anyway, to reproduce, to lay eggs, to make youngins, the next generation of machine. And so these replicating biological mechanisms, that's what we are, just replicating biological machines, and with this very interesting brain that is you. Okay, we'll call it a you. Mine's creating a thing called a me, and yours is creating what I call a you, but to you it's a me, and it has this capacity to generate, manifest, make feelings be realized, and they can be very bad feelings and very good feelings, very positive do again feelings, and very negative don't do ever again feelings. And that is the context in which the brain thinks and remembers and learns how to interact, how to try to make more good feelings than bad feelings, obviously. But in our context, we can recognize it's not a single player game. We can also have things that we're emotionally attached to: your dog, your kids, your parents, your sisters, your brothers. We can be cheaters in our affections. Pretty people get more attention than ugly people, all that kind of crap. But we can do this smart thing and then rise above our crude nature, our selfishness, our nepotism, and our bigotries, and recognize an obligation to treat the other machines as we would like the other machines to treat us, and all of that crap. Which is, yes, it's bullshit, but it's the truth. That's the only way the game can be played, because you can't take the pain and move it to some other brain and have accomplished anything, because it's still a brain in pain, and it doesn't really matter whether it's your brain or their brain or his brain or her brain. And recognizing that is, one of these, the big change in the bullshit you're living by, is that's a big change in the bullshit you live by, is when you recognize that's the obligation, is that you do have to, you can't damage, the environment. You can't damage the stuff in the environment. It's not disposable, it's not breakable, it's not any of that kind of crap. It's just as precious as you are. And that kind of guiding philosophy, bullshit, it will change you. When you recognize that's what you're really playing for, that's the only thing there's a real trophy for, is successfully navigating your life without causing something else to pay the price for it. Recognizing your obligation as a machine, that the only thing that's really going to matter is how much bad did you prevent, and that's the victory, is preventing all of the bad things that can take place that don't need to take place. Find the unnecessary pain and prevent it. And the simple argument is, if you take that to its extreme, is that all of the pain is unnecessary. None of it's buying anything but storytelling. So there's a bunch of people telling their bullshit, saying their bullshit, spouting their narrative, and their narrative has somewhere in it some kind of notion that people need to win Olympic gold medals. Like if we ended the Olympics tomorrow, oh, a horrible tragedy. That somehow we have to keep striving to accomplish something by being here. That somehow if we're not here, the universe is in some huge deficit that will never recover from. And it's just as ridiculous as thinking the universe was somehow empty and void and in pain or in prison before humans became human. That somehow it wasn't a good enough story. That somehow, and all we have done is add bullshit to the story. So the story of the crocodile and the dinosaurs and all of the other shit that's gone on this planet without any thought and without any philosophy and without any version of bullshit, it all took place. It's all real, and all of that horror and all of that bloodletting and all of that agony and pain was for nothing. It doesn't accomplish anything. Just like right now, you don't sit around saying, wow, the ocean is so teeming with life. It's so productive. It's doing so much good stuff. There's all kinds of organisms being ripped to pieces every day. No, there's no victory in that. If we found another planet that just had sea life in it, you would have to be, I would argue, you'd have to have one big pile of bullshit in your brain to be happy for them. To be celebrating, oh, how wonderful it is that all of these organisms are competing to exist and they're killing their children, okay, in obscene numbers. I mean, it's just mass murder, school shooting all over the place. Just kill as many kids as you can. 1,000-to-1 ratios of survival. And that spectacle would be something to feel good about. No, it's because you have some layer of bullshit, some sort of shield of bullshit that somehow makes that make sense. That there's some kind of victory in the great white shark swimming as king of the ocean. That somehow that's just a huge victory. When it's, it's meat grinder. It is exactly what it looks like. Meat grinder, right. It's smiling. I'm here to meat grind. Baby kill. And so there's no, that's the real narrative is that there's no good story. There's not only no happily ever after, there was never any purpose ever was. There was never any voyage to the bottom of anything, and there was never a voyage to the top of anything. There was never anything to cure or fix. And all we are is the problem. And there's no solution beyond correcting the existence of the problem. And so, yes, the best solution is to go to where the Earth was 4 billion years ago, when it was not infested by complicated machines living bullshit, pretending they're accomplishing something, when all they're going to do is die miserably. Struggle and then die miserably. Yeah, walk the trail of tears and then die miserably. Just looking at the cats sitting on the stoop. The one cat went blind. And Santino was just going to hit her in the face. That was when I took the picture. They were friends, but yes, they did bug each other somehow. And Mello, poor Mello. I don't know what his end was, but I'm sure by now he's had one. And I'm sure it was horrible and terrible and tragic. You can barely see him right up there. Anyway, Yeah, and that's this, all this bullshit that you see some kind of purpose in making more brains to be infected with some bullshit narrative to go play in a cesspool of blood and guts, and go yum 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 yum, eat each other's pain and suffering with pleasure. Other people's failure, enjoy it. Yeah, no, that's sick bullshit. Okay, it's not just bullshit. It's not just a lie and a pile of crap. It's evil crap. It's ignorant crap. It's foolish crap. And you should acquire the character to let it go and concede that, yes, you're full of shit. You're going to live your bullshit. But there's no point in making things that live in bullshit. Live for bullshit, by bullshit, in bullshit. And to let the notion go that there's some purpose in attempting to make another you. Yeah. Because it won't be you. It'll be somebody completely different. And they might not share your enthusiasm for learning that they're just living a life of bullshit. Yeah, okay. So that's probably enough. Enough of today's sermon, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I am surprised that people who have lived a little bit and seen, the worst of it, can with any enthusiasm have conversation about how it's just so grand and spectacular, that we keep generating victims. No, it's not good. Yeah, it's a tragedy that shouldn't exist, frankly, because it is quite obvious. It's written all over the place. It isn't an amusement park. It's something you'd say, some kind of terrorizing park. So I have to think of some other way to say amusement park in the reverse. There's nothing amusing in all of the waste and tragedy. Okay. But go about your business. Just don't sell it. Okay? Go about your personal business of thinking you're on the move and going somewhere, but don't sell any tickets. Alright, so enough of the video. Till the next time and such and so forth. And whatnot. Don't get in the way, okay, of the people who might help the world gracefully let go of the streams of bullshit. Alright. So, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Alright, not quite finished. I guess I should have made a conditional statement regarding the whole idea of the movie I referenced in the beginning, called Hero, where the guy saves people and all this kind of stuff. And, I'm not really endorsing saving people, because you really can't. You can't save somebody's life. You can just extend their life. And the question becomes, is that in anybody's best interest? You could, as you say it, just as a general statement, especially if they were in some unconscious state. So I could argue that one individual was unconscious, and the question is, should you drag them out of a fire where they would have died without knowing they were even dead and all that kind of stuff? And are you doing them a favor? Because now they're going to have to die some real hard way in the future, probably. And that's not going to be in their interest. at all. But generally speaking, the argument just is in this immediate argument of if people are in trouble and there's a real threat of pain and suffering in the now, it's pretty hard not to react and say, there's got to be a better way. There's hope that you'll have a better ending than that bad ending. So that's sort of the argument. I mean, we can all hope for the future that eventually there'll be a rational right to die, and people will be able to die much more gracefully than they are now, because it won't be about how terminal you are or how how anything you are, besides convinced that it's stupid to waste your own suffering. And if you're done living, you should be allowed to be done living and gracefully discontinue your participation among the living, because it's in no one's interest for somebody to suffer, to live a life they don't themselves even find value in, let alone some projection of some other reason besides some emotional one. Because there's no literal, factual reason unless you have some value, some capacity to do something to eliminate or prevent somebody else from being tortured. So, we're all going to die. You can't really save anybody's life. It's just a silly kind of term, a silly idea. You can only extend people's lives and change how they die, and those changes may not be a good thing. So I'm just saying it gets more complicated. I'm saying you're watching a movie, you just say in the moment you have to just act. You can't go through all the trolley question permutations and try to figure out how how life is going to be improved or made worse by any one individual continuing their participation, because you really can't know who they are and all that crap. So you have to just go with the immediate circumstance, which is I'm going to compare their current bad death to what I would hope would be a better death in the future, that kind of thing, and a capacity to live a life where they might do some good somewhere. And you have to just sort of assume that hopeful perception is the correct one, even though it's not very realistic, and that that probably you could fill airplane after airplane full of human beings who would be better off dying quickly in a plane crash than living out the natural life, the life they are slated to live. And there's just a lot of people who are in a circumstance that isn't good. I mean, I could be one of them, you could be one of them. All kinds of bad stuff could be in our future, and but we can't know any of that, and that's the real problem. It just makes the whole conversation difficult, because I can't rub your bad fate in your face and say, see your bad fate. Can't do that. So you're not going to be convinced until it's way too late. When you're way too you're useless, and your screams won't do any good. Your regrets won't do any good. Your realization, that you lived a bit of a lie won't be any good. And that's unfortunate. But it's the circumstance we're in, so the argument has to be made without me being able to show you your whole life and its rotten conclusion, and how you disappear as a thing that was, even you're just a melted snowball. Nobody saw. Anyway, it's all kind of dismal. Anyway, so that's it. Just throwing it in just to give context. I'm not supporting necessarily saving people's lives. I'm supporting the idea of trying to help wherever you can. And in some circumstances, you just can't. You can't react to a circumstance in any other way than just to say, in this immediate circumstance, I can recommend it. I can notice it's bad, and I can try to make it less bad. But you can't be sure you're not making it worse, and you just can't. There's nothing you can do about that. You can just try to hope that the future is better than their past and better than the present. I guess that's the real key point. Something like that, anyway. So, yeah, just a bit of an add-on, blah, 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 blah. So, till the next time and such. I think I'm done. Yeah, I think I'm done. Done trying for today. I will try again another day and such. So, till the next time.